Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. I know for some of you, this is your third week with us, and some of you are joining this week for the first time, and we're happy to have all of you. We are recording this. You can find the recording for this after the session is over, and for previous weeks and a bunch of other resources from the last 2 weeks over at votesaveamerica.com/save-america. And as more people are joining, we're going to go ahead and do some tech housekeeping. Welcome to everyone joining us on Zoom and on the phone. Although if you're in the phone, I do recommend that you try to get to a device where you can see the slides as well. And I know we're also broadcasting to YouTube, so some of you are watching us there as well. So we are going to be using the Q&A box tonight for any questions or comments that you have. That's the box down at the bottom of your screen. We do have organizers that are there to answer some of your questions as the evening goes on. And then time permitting, we are going to have a section at the end where a couple of the people from our organizing department will answer some of your questions as well. And then of course, we're going to use the chat box that you guys are all saying hi in throughout the night to do some call and response and to continue to do shout outs and things like that. Don't forget to tweet what you've learned so far. And to use your personal story and hard ass skills that we've learned about over the past couple of weeks to get people you know and people you don't know involved. And the hashtags for tonight are hashtag training together, hashtag vote save America, and hashtag adopt WI. And we're going to go ahead and review our community agreements that we've gone over the past couple of weeks. And this is just to make sure that everyone has a great experience today. First, we want to support each other. This is a place of learning. Don't be afraid to ask questions in the Q&A. We really love hearing from you guys. In particular, those organizing questions. We'll try to get to those at the end with Joe and Carrie. And our organizers are also doing their best to type in responses as well, but I know there's probably going to be a lot of them by the end, so we'll do what we can. No trolling or cyberbullying. Keep language suitable for all audiences. We do have kids in here as well and teens that are looking to get into organizing. And we want to be respectful of everyone here, even if you have differing views, if you supported different candidates in the primary, and we want to keep it positive. We're here looking to make a change for the better. And we have so many people here that are looking to become volunteer organizers and ready to do their part. So we want to make sure to keep it positive. If you have any issues during the call, any tech problems, you can email vsa@organizing2020.com. And when you do that, be sure to tell them you're on the Wisconsin call so they can help you out appropriately. And for everyone joining us for the first time tonight, OT 2020 is a community-based, volunteer-driven organizing campaign designed to get operational in 2020 earlier than ever. Here in Wisconsin, we have 75 staff. Some of us have been on the ground since January and February to lay the groundwork for what's to come this year. And of course, Vote Save America is your one-stop shop for all the information and tools you need to participate in 2020. At Vote Save America, you can register to vote. You can check to see if you're still registered. You can request your absentee ballot, which we are going to be talking about today. You can see what's going to be on your ballot before Election Day. You can find a job to do this kind of thing full time. Hopefully you've already adopted Wisconsin, but if not, you can adopt us there. And then you can get trained on how to be a volunteer leader, which I hope many of you will do. So here on this next slide, we have your main presenters for tonight. I am Catherine Shelton. I am one of Wisconsin's deputy organizing directors, and I also run the state's training program. And you're also going to hear in a little bit from Deputy Organizing Director Joe Waldman and our trainers, Carrie Spaniel and Alex Cobb. And then we are going to have our political director, Nick Chirag, who's going to close us out and send you guys off with some calls to action. But for now, I am thrilled to announce our special guest, Kim Kohlhaas. She is the president of the American Federation of Teachers here in Wisconsin. And thank you so much for joining us, Kim.
Hey everyone, really inspired by the number of people that are on.
You should be unmuted, Kim. Let's see.
Got it? Can you hear me now? Good, you can hear me? Okay. I'm really inspired by the number of people that are on this call. I'm a little overwhelmed, I have to say. But I do love the fact that I'm looking through the chat box and all the people from across the country that are here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, but more importantly, thank you for volunteering. I think Wisconsin had, with our spring primary, we showed how chaotic elections can be under our current situation. Our spring election was filled with emotions. That was a really difficult day, but it was a difficult week leading up to that because every day we had a different decision by the courts. We had different laws to abide by. We had people who were voting absentee one day that was legal, and the next day their absentee ballot wasn't legal. And so when it came to the actual day of the election, people were really unsure if their votes even counted from the work that they had done before. That day was really difficult. I was livid, but deeply inspired. I was livid because the level of voter suppression that we saw in the weeks leading up to that day were really intense. We had people who were willing to put people's lives on the line, the health and safety of the volunteers. The majority of our people that volunteer on election day as poll workers are the elderly age category, and they had to decide, are they willing to volunteer or to stay home? We had a lot of confusion. We had people that were really concerned about whether or not their vote was going to count. But then when it came to the actual seeing people voting became extremely inspirational. We saw people standing in line 6 feet apart, wearing masks. We saw elderly people coming with their walkers and sitting in line for hours at a time. We saw people bringing books because they knew they were going to be there for a long time waiting. Snacks, we saw groups passing out water. And then later that evening, we had rainstorms come through and people were standing in line hours after the polls because they didn't have enough poll locations that were open. And like deeply moved at how people were willing to put themselves out there and to commit to voting and to commit to their voices being heard on that day. It was so inspiring. And it was really one of those steps that now when I see what we need to do in November and how critically important it is for us to have the ability to vote by mail, it is safe, it is clear, there's no confusion as to what you need to do, and it puts everybody into a position where their democratic voice can be heard. I just think it's so critically important. And so I want to thank everybody for you reaching out and being willing to volunteer to make sure that the democracy is available for everybody that's there. So thank you very much, folks. I just appreciate your time and your training.
I think we may be having some audio problems here. But my name's Joe. I'm one of the other deputy organizing directors. So we're super lucky to have Kim speaking today. Thank you so much. So, Catherine, can you hear me? Oh, I think Catherine's still frozen. Okay, so with that, we're also super lucky to be joined later in the program tonight by Jon Lovett. He is a former presidential speechwriter, as well as a TV writer, podcast host, and a straight shooter widely respected on both sides. And after starting a feud with the entire state of Pennsylvania in 2018, Lovett is now working hard to make sure that his adopted state turns blue this November. So we're super excited to have him here in Wisconsin as well, where he'll be hopping in later on the call. Okay, Catherine, are you back? Okay. No worries. Well, next, we're actually going to introduce everyone to a handful of our amazing organizers who have been working tirelessly to recruit volunteers and engage voters. So please say hi in the chat as they introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. Identify as she, her, hers. And the reason why I wanted to get involved in organizing is because I've always said a lot of things that I've wanted to do, but finally I've wanted to take action. And I just graduated from University of Wisconsin-Madison, go Badgers. And I've been very lucky to call OT 2020 my first time job.
Hey everyone, I'm Grady. Wait, is it? Oh. Hey everyone, I'm Grady, he, him, his, and I'm organizing because it is vital to our democracy to remove Trump. And the only way that we can do that is if we all join together and organize together.
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney, she, her, hers. I organize because I'm fed up with feeling powerless against injustice. So I'm gonna fight like my rights depend on it, because they do.
Hi everybody, my name's Nate, he, him, his, and I'm organizing so that I can make a difference in my community and the state that I love.
Hey everyone, I'm Aubrey, he, him, his, and I'm organizing because I believe everybody deserves access to affordable healthcare.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, organizers. And they are going to be dropping links in the Q&A throughout this call about how you can get involved in Wisconsin going forward.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much taking over while I had some technical difficulties there. Welcome to the world of working on Zoom. So you guys have learned so much over the past couple of weeks, including how to talk to people you know and people you don't know about volunteering, how to make the hard ask, and then how to craft your story of self, us, and now in order to engage with other volunteers and voters. So this week is going to be the most practical of all the training sessions. At the end of today, you'll be ready to talk to Wisconsin voters, whether that's by text or by phone, to help them to request ballots to vote by mail. And as a former lawyer, making sure that voting is accessible is one of my main passions. So I'm very excited that you guys are all going to learn why voting by mail is so important, especially here in Wisconsin. So back in week one, we learned about the phases of the campaign. We're still in capacity building, but this year, the phases are gonna kind of blur together. And remember, you joined early, so you're getting in on the ground floor. We also shared in week one the volunteer team model, which helps to create teams that have sustainable structures, and we dug into relational organizing. And this term refers to talking to people we know by reaching out to people who are in a high priority state, who care about the issues, and who don't know yet how to get involved as a volunteer. And whether you're talking to people you know or you don't know, you will use that volunteer superpower, which is the hard ask. And then last week, you learned about telling the story of self, us, and now with Jon Favreau. And you learned why personal storytelling is so incredibly effective. You learned the components of storytelling and also some ideas around where, when, and how to share your story for maximum effectiveness. And if you haven't had a chance to use those skills yet in the past that you've learned over the past couple of weeks, you're going to get the chance to after tonight because we are going to be this weekend talking to voters about vote by mail. And before we dig in, I'd like to learn a little bit more about why you adopted Wisconsin and why it's so important to you in the upcoming election. So go ahead and share some of those reasons in the chat box real quick. And Joe, could you go ahead and read out some of those examples for us?
I see Wisconsin is the best state. I'm a Badger. We can't let our country down. Cheese curds, a lot of cheese curd references in here. Always a fan of that. UW-Madison class of 2016, same, nice. And Wisconsin is super, super critically important for this election. It might be decided here.
Yeah, Yes, it absolutely might be decided here. That is for sure. So thank you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Carrie. She is our regional organizing director for Madison, and she's going to talk to you some more about why Wisconsin matters so much and why vote by mail is so important.
Thanks, Catherine. Hey, everyone, I'm Carrie. I grew up in California, but have been living here in Chicago for 13 plus years and have been working remotely in Wisconsin since March. So want to give a shout out to all my California and Illinois friends that we have adopting Wisconsin this year. Thank you all so much. Wisconsin is definitely a key battleground state that we absolutely need to win in November. So speaking of winning in November, we definitely need to turn out as many voters as possible. And the best way to look forward to doing that is, and the safest way is vote by mail. So vote by mail here in Wisconsin is really easy. Any registered voter can go ahead and request a ballot online or by mail and have it mailed directly to their house. So that is why we are starting to have these conversations with you all now about the vote by mail program, because we need to turn out the maximum amount of voters in November if we want to see a win. Shockingly, or maybe not shockingly to many of you, only 60% of eligible voters actually turned out to the polls in the 2016 presidential election, which we always ask ourselves, why is this? Sadly, our country has a long history of making it very difficult to vote. Whether it's National Election Day not being a holiday, lack of access for many voters, there are too many obstacles keeping voters from the polls. So if you can go ahead and drop some thoughts in the chat boxes, why do you think it is that people don't show up to the polls? Let's see. Give it a few more seconds. There's so many answers here. Catherine, can you read a few of these off as you see them come in?
Yes, I'm trying to read through all the crazy amounts of answers we got here. So a lot of people are saying they don't have time, maybe they're working, they don't have childcare. Wisconsin is cold, someone just said, but that's very true. It could be snowing. Or they just, maybe they can't get out of the house very well. They're sick or they're elderly and they're not able to get to the poll.
Yeah, these are all spot on examples, as well as all the rest that I'm seeing you all pop in the chat box. And now another major barrier that we have to all address to voting that we are in this year is we are facing an unprecedented global pandemic. So back in April, Wisconsin became the first state that held a major election during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a story that we saw roll out across the news, across social media, every corner we looked in. People were talking about the primary in Wisconsin and what a devastating situation it was. This, unfortunately, could be something that we could all be facing in November. On April 7th, Wisconsinites were set to vote on many important things, one being the Democratic primary for president. We had referendums for Milwaukee and Racine public school funding, and a very important Wisconsin Supreme Court race between conservative Dan Kelly and progressive Jill Karofsky. In the weeks leading up to the election, COVID-19 cases were rising across the state and across the country. Governor Evers issued a stay-at-home order and called for conservative-controlled legislature to expand vote-by-mail access and postpone the election. But conservative lawmakers refused and pushed for an in-person primary election. As the election inched closer, it became very clear that our state was heading towards disaster. Only 5 out of 180 polling places in Milwaukee were set to remain open on election day for voters to go to. Meanwhile,
Carrie, I'm so sorry to pause this right now, but I believe we are about to be joined by our special guest for the evening.
Wonderful.
What's up, Wisconsin?
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us, Jon.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here. I've said this and I'll say it again. I may come from the East Coast, all right? I may be a pro New York and Los Angeles, okay? but constitutionally, emotionally, all right, I to eat, and therefore I believe I am spiritually tied to Wisconsin. I like the Wisconsin lifestyle, and so I'm very honored to get to be here. You know, this is I don't think any of us thought we'd be in Zooms to do this kind of work, to do this organizing, and so it's taken this most incredibly difficult job of winning in the fall and all the amount of work that goes into that, and added this extra layer of figuring out how to organize if we can't be in the same place all the time, if we have to do things remotely, if we have to call people, if it changes what it means to canvass, changes what it means to get out the vote. That's what this session is all about. But it's so inspiring to see so many people dedicated to that, so many people putting in the work and putting in the time and wanting to do their part. I think that's made me incredibly hopeful even during this dark time. So I'm so thankful, and I want to, you know, I think it's more important to hear from experts and the organizers and people that are going to get us all ready and trained and equipped for this fight. So I just want to come in and kind of put Wisconsin to the test. I believe that we have an organizer who I'm going to quiz here. Is that right?
I believe that's me. My name's Joe.
Oh, hi, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Joe, what brings you to Wisconsin? Are you from Wisconsin?
I'm actually a fellow Jew from New York who came to Wisconsin.
Well, I think that's fine, all right? Because Wisconsin's a welcoming place, all right? And even though we may bring a lactose intolerant spirit to Culver's, we can overcome it with lactate, all right? And a kind of joy, a Midwestern joy. And so we're gonna put you to the test, all right? And make sure that you're ready to organize in Wisconsin, all right? And we have many people watching this stream who are going to be paying very close attention to make sure that you're ready to convince Wisconsin voters, okay, to do what it takes to get rid of Trump and win up and down the ballot. Okay, are you ready, Joe?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. First question, is someone allowed to vote even if they wear their Packers cheese hat year round like it's a regular hat?
Yes, and encouraged to do so.
Yes, that I think a no would have been very difficult for you to overcome for the remainder of the quiz. So I think you're doing great. I think you should feel very happy about that answer. All right. Next question. You've just finished eating a plate of the squeakiest cheese curds when you amble over to the nearest public bubbler. Ugh. A woman in a cheese head gets in line behind you. When you've both gotten some water, you bond over the Bon Iver song playing from the outdoor PA system, and she mentions that she saw him at a Bernie rally earlier this year. She's interested in voting, but doesn't know what documents she'll need to get registered. What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well,
is it, Joe? Is it a great question? The end is okay. The end is okay. Sorry to interrupt. Continue, Joe.
No, in order to register to vote, well, you can register to vote on Election Day here in Wisconsin, but in order to register to vote online, you'll need a proof of residence. So that can be like a updated address on the DMV website, or it could be another type of proof of residence. But you can find all of that information on myvote.wi.gov. So everybody who's thinking about this should go to myvote.wi.gov to make sure you have all the right info.
You know what I love about this? I have no idea if that's right. You're the experts. Somebody tell me. I hope it's right. I love the comments. I like that there's an ongoing chat telling both you and me how we're doing. My original plan, by the way, I want everyone to know watching this stream that I had a whole plan that this was what you were going to see when I came in here, because I consider Wisconsin to be a spiritual home. But the problem is I couldn't get it to work on my laptop. So I can only do this, but you can also do this and kind of become a Culver's in a kind of psychedelic way. So that's something that's pretty cool. Final question for you, Joe. All right. I just saw some comments about my unadorned background. A Wisconsin man, let's see. Let's find a good question for you. All right, here it is. You're picking up some onions and beers for your brat boil when you realize you forgot the kraut and mustard. You turn around but step in a pothole and bump into a man in full camo. He apologizes to you and offers to buy you a shandy. over Leinenkugels. He tells you he likes showing up to vote on election day, but isn't sure he'll get to go to his polling location. What do you do?
Well, I'll tell him all about how you can vote by mail, which is super, super easy. And everyone, including that guy in camo, hope he's on the call tonight, can learn all about in just a few moments.
How did I say Leinenkugel incorrectly, commenters? I've never had an ongoing comment section mid-conversation. It's very alarming. How do you say it? Oh, there's too many comments for me to see. Leinenkugel? Leinenkugel. Of course. Joe, you've won the game. Great
Fantastic.
job. Thank you to everybody working so hard to organize and win in Wisconsin. It's an incredible thing you're doing. I'm so grateful. And I hope that even in this dark time for our country, you have a chance to be with this incredible group of inspiring people trying to do what's right and fix what's broken. So thank you all so much. I will leave it now to the experts and the organizers who will help us help make sure you're all ready to go. And that's it. All right. I'll see you at Culver's next time that's possible.
Thank you so much, John. Amazing. That was awesome. Cool. Well, I am going to hand it back over to Carrie, I believe, who will continue on from here.
That is not a difficult person to follow at all, said nobody ever. So we are jumping back into talking about what was going on in Wisconsin leading up to the election. So let's see, I think the last thing I said was we were seeing all over the news that there were going to be very limited polling places across the state, and people were scrambling to request their absentee ballots, and the Election Commission was overwhelmed with the amount of people requesting ballots and were trying to do their best to get as many out as quickly as possible. And although vote by mail doesn't benefit one particular political party, and it should absolutely be a bipartisan issue, Wisconsin Republicans usually assume that the more people that vote equals bad news for them. So we had Republican leaders, including Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, who refused to admit the danger that millions of Wisconsinites were going to be in when they had to make the choice to cast their vote or stay safe due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here he is sending a few mixed messages, I would say. Nothing says everything is fine like Chernobyl cosplay. The conservative majority of the Wisconsin Supreme Court blocked an attempt by Governor Evers to postpone the election. The US Supreme Court, to make things even worse, struck down an extension of the deadline to return absentee ballots, which caused a disenfranchising of thousands of people who had yet to receive their ballots and didn't even have the opportunity to turn it back in. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Catherine, who's going to tell you what the aftermath of the primary in Wisconsin looked like.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm trying to come down from the excitement of hearing from Jon Lovett. That was really cool. But this is really serious business. So, Carrie talked to you a little bit about what happened, but basically across the state, particularly in larger cities, lines at the polling places stretched on for blocks. In Milwaukee, in particular, the situation was pretty dire. Many people who requested absentee ballots still hadn't received them by election day and were basically forced to choose between their health and safety or their right to vote. So voters risked their personal health to wait in long lines for hours. It was also raining in some places. And then photos like these were flooding social media, showing the country in a devastating situation. We saw tons of these pictures from all over Wisconsin. And many voters could see exactly what was going on. Wisconsin Republicans were basically playing politics with people's lives, as you'll see in this clip.
This is just so wrong. This election should have been called off. They're telling us to stay in the house and, stand 6 feet from each other. But then one of the most important times They're forcing us to come out here in a group. Stop playing politics with our lives. You know, that's what I'm feeling.
You're feeling like this is a game with your life.
Yeah.
And this was basically, you know, we heard stories like this just constantly. It was hard to listen to and hard to accept that that was happening in our state. And our team spent the days leading up to the primary talking with as many voters as possible to try to ensure they safely got their votes cast by absentee ballot, or if they were forced to make the decision to go to the polls there. And in the process, we heard many heartbreaking stories. This is one that Kelly heard. She's one of our organizers. And she said, I just talked to a 94-year-old man in the 53206 zip code, one of the most disenfranchised areas of Milwaukee. He is so ill, he can't get out of bed, but was begging me to try to find him a ride to the polls. He said he was actually willing to die to make sure he voted. So even voters that did request a ballot, people who did the right thing and tried to plan in advance, they may have received it too late. 50% of mail-in ballots were never returned. This was likely because they were just sent out later than they should have been by overwhelmed local election officials. And Wisconsin wasn't prepared for the massive surge and last-minute requests. And as a result, the system was overwhelmed and many people didn't get their ballots in time. I know you guys have probably heard about flattening the curve for COVID-19, where you try to prevent that spike, that sudden spike in cases that causes the healthcare system to be overwhelmed. Well, we want to kind of do the same thing. We want to flatten the curve for vote by mail by helping people request ballots as far in advance as possible, so we don't have a rush of people doing it all at the same time. And that's basically what we've been doing in Wisconsin. We've been working these past several weeks, and what many of you will be doing also this weekend. But Republican voter suppression efforts did not succeed in stealing the election. We did come away with wins, but they did expose more people to COVID-19 and put Wisconsinites' health at risk. A post-election study found that 71 people were infected with COVID-19 after working at the polls or voting in person on April 7th. And a lot of these new cases were concentrated in the city of Milwaukee. And even today, Milwaukee community continues to face the worst of COVID-19 pandemic in the state, with communities of color hit especially hard. And with many experts predicting a COVID-19 resurgence in the fall, Wisconsin's nightmare could become the rest of America's reality in November. Donald Trump has already started railing against vote by mail. But the lesson learned from this is basically we need to start urging Wisconsin voters to request their ballots now. We can't wait to be disappointed by leadership or have our individual rights to participate in democracy while staying safe and healthy stripped yet again. So now I'm actually going to turn it over to Alex, and he's going to walk you through exactly what we're going to be doing to prepare together for November.
Thanks, Catherine. So I am Alex, the Regional Organizing Director in the WOW counties. For those of you from Wisconsin, you know that that stands for Washington, Ozaukee, and Waukesha, right outside of Milwaukee. In addition to being essential during a global pandemic, vote by mail has been shown to be one of the most efficient and cost-effective ways to bank votes in our communities. Vote by mail makes voting more accessible for older folks, people with disabilities, and people who can't get off from work, among others. Vote by mail has always been used by overseas military personnel, so we know it's an effective and safe method. Looking ahead to November, voting by mail will be more important than ever before. 71% of Wisconsinites voted by mail during the April 7th election, a huge increase over the 12% of vote by mail ballots cast the previous year. If the numbers are anywhere close to that for November, we need to get started now to prepare and educate voters on the process. The Wisconsin Election Commission is sending registered voters an absentee ballot request form in the mail, but that still means voters will need to mail that application form back and fill out and mail their actual ballots once they arrive. That also doesn't include all of the Wisconsinites who still need to register to vote or to update their registration address. We have a lot of work to do between now and November. You adopted Wisconsin because you know how important it is to the outcome of this election. Make no mistake, Wisconsin will be the state that decides the president. But vote by mail might be what decides Wisconsin. So everyone, regardless of where you live, should care about the success of vote by mail here. Donald Trump certainly does. It's on us to make sure the events of April 7th aren't repeated here or anywhere else. Our organizers have already been working hard, talking to voters on the phone for the past month and a half, to educate people how to vote by mail. And in some cases, actually walking them through the process over the phone while they request an absentee ballot. We break our program up into 3 basic stages or phases. So this is the phase we're in right now, the application generation phase. This is the call a stranger on the phone and ask them to do stuff phase. In the application phase, we reach as many likely progressive voters as we can to encourage them to request an absentee ballot ahead of the deadline. Here in Wisconsin, requests can be made over the phone to their municipal clerk's office, by mail, or ideally online. How do we get people to commit to requesting a ballot? Remembering back to week 1 and that training you went through and thinking about why people say yes to volunteering. The same concepts apply here. People will request an absentee ballot because they can, they're eligible, they have the time, and they understand how to do it. They want to. You've successfully communicated the importance to them, and they're asked to. They're much more likely to vote if a volunteer reaches out and asks them to do it. Week after week, you've been building up the skills and the knowledge to make this happen. Your relational organizing skills, your hard-ass skills, and your personal storytelling skills are a very powerful combination to mobilize voters. All right, phase 2. After the application phase, we move to ballot chasing. This is the nagging phase of our operation. Ballot chasing is what it sounds like. We contact the people who requested an absentee ballot and remind them to complete and submit it. If you've done phone banking before to recruit people for events, you may have heard of doing confirmation calls. This is basically the same thing. We're confirming their commitment to vote by mail. Then finally, the final phase is voting. Every vote you bank early makes the list of people you'll reach during GOTV, which is get out the vote the last 4 days before an election, more efficient. In other words, the more people who vote early, such as voting by mail, the fewer people we need to contact to make sure they show up on election day. Now, we don't want to ignore the fact that there are some limitations. Mail delivery can be an issue in Wisconsin Native American communities, and there are some people who will remain wary of vote by mail after the April primary. We don't know what the world will look like in November, but the safest thing we can do for voters is to encourage them to exercise their right to request an absentee ballot. Before we share with you some next steps on how you can take action, we wanted to include some words of wisdom to take heart in the months ahead.
What's going to fix our democracy is you. People ask me, what are you going to do for the election? Now the question is, what are you going to do? You're the antidote. Your participation and your spirit and your determination, not just in this election, but in every subsequent election and in the days between elections. Because in the end, the threat to our democracy doesn't just come from Donald Trump or the current batch of Republicans in Congress or the Koch brothers and their lobbyists or too much compromise from Democrats or Russian hacking. The biggest threat to our democracy is indifference. The biggest threat to our democracy is cynicism.
All right. I saw some of you guys in the chat. I miss him so much. I also miss having a president who can string together a full sentence. I'm now going to pass this off to Carrie and Joe, who are going to answer some of the questions that you've all been putting in the Q&A box this evening.
Thanks, Alex. I'm following another tough person, Obama here, but Joe and I are going to answer a few of your questions that you had in the chat box. So I'm going to start with asking Joe one of the questions, and then he'll ask me one of the questions, and we'll popcorn it back and forth a few times. So Joe, I'm going to ask you the first question I've got here. What is the most rewarding part about being an organizer?
Well, that is a really good question. And it's honestly hard to pick. There's a lot of really rewarding parts, but I would say the most rewarding part is being able to know at the end of the day when you're watching the election results come in that you had a say in what happened and that you did everything in your power to make sure that Donald Trump was a one-term president. My other favorite parts, it's really amazing to talk to all the amazing volunteers and supporters and voters that you get to meet through the process of being an organizer. People who, some of whom have never gotten involved in political activism before, but saw what Donald Trump was doing and wanted to make a difference. And in general, it's just a really fun job. If anybody on this call is at all considering even a little bit applying to be an organizer anywhere, then you should do it. You should do it. It is incredibly rewarding, and you get the chance to participate and really be a leader in making change happen in one of the most important moments in American history, I think. So if you're thinking about being an organizer, you should be an organizer and apply now, because it's super fun and you won't regret it. I will go ahead and ask Carrie a question now. So Carrie, how has it changed from organizing in person to organizing digitally?
Well, basically the fundamentals of organizing haven't changed. Organizing is about building relationships with people in your network and people in communities, but we have just had to do it very differently now that we have been organizing virtually. So it is activating people in your network and engaging with people often via email, online, social media, text messages. But fundamentally, what we're still trying to do is activate the people around us to care about the things that are important to us as voters, and make sure that they're stepping up and getting their voice out there as well. We're just doing it a bit differently, not knocking on as many doors, not going to as many community meetings, not doing as many house parties, but we are texting, emailing, calling, posting online, posting in Facebook groups. We're having virtual house parties. We're doing virtual trainings and events just like you all are attending here and have attended many of our other trainings. So it is a bit different, but what we're trying to do and what we need to do together is very similar to traditional organizing. We're just all doing it virtually from our homes, but we still have a lot to get done this year, and we're gonna do it virtually or traditionally. It needs to get done, and we're gonna do it. All right, that is my answer there. So I'm going to pop it back to Joe with a question. We have seen a lot of questions in the chat about the difference between absentee ballots and vote by mail, given we have a lot of people from out of state as well. Would you be able to give the definition of the difference between when we say vote by mail versus an absentee ballot?
Yeah, definitely. So here in Wisconsin, you do not need a reason, as you do in some other states, in order to request an absentee ballot. But you do need to request one. So it's basically in Wisconsin sort of the same thing. And we've been using it a little bit interchangeably. But when we say vote by mail, it's the same process as requesting an absentee ballot in the mail. Awesome. I can kick it over to Carrie. Let's see here. Okay, so I see one. As a middle school history teacher, do you think it would be unethical to organize and train engaged activist ex-students in high school and beyond in organizing? And I can also speak on this one a little bit too, but I can let Carrie go first.
I'll give it my answer, but I'll definitely hand it back to you because I think this is a really, really good question. So I think that as long as the person is old enough to be forming their own individual opinions and can understand the policies they're advocating for and the candidates they're advocating for, I don't think there's an age too young to be wanting to stand up for what's right and to participate in democracy. Yes, they might not be able to vote yet, but also there's lots of people that can't vote for different reasons that we still want to be participating in democracy. I worked on a previous campaign in California, and one of my coworkers had her 3 kids. Youngest was 8, 13 and 17, and they came in with her almost every single weekend and knocked doors and made phone calls, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They felt strongly about getting Donald Trump out of the office, and even as younger kids, they understood how important it was and they wanted to participate. So I think that that is absolutely a great idea. And I think it's also a really good way to educate younger people on democracy and on issues that they need to care about as the next generation steps up and takes over organizing. And Joe, I'll let you add anything to that.
Yeah, real quick. So I have a little bit of a background in this. Before this position, I did youth organizing, and there is no such thing as being too young to be a volunteer. My youngest all-time volunteer, I think, was like 6 or 7 years old and canvassed in his Spider-Man Halloween costume, which was great. So I hope that there are tons of people on this call who are in college, high school, middle school. If anything, the last 4 years have taught us, it's that young people can make real change happen, regardless of whether or not they're old enough to vote. But if they are old enough to vote, if young people turn out to vote in record numbers, then Donald Trump will be a one-term president. So absolutely, young people need to turn out to vote, and yeah, youth can make the difference. So awesome. I believe that we are currently out of time for questions. So next up, I am going to pass it off to our amazing political director, Nick Truog, who is on the call right now. So take it away, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Everyone, I am really humbled to see so many people from all over the country adopt Wisconsin. But it means you don't understand how much it means to me. As someone born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the most segregated city in America, the worst place to raise a Black child, I grew up with a single mother who had to make the decision between keeping the lights on in our house or making sure that we had food on the table. And I even remember all the things that I experienced growing up. I knew was wrong and I wanted to make a difference. So when I was in college, I organized. I organized around the issues I cared about. And when I was in 2016, I was a volunteer who worked tirelessly to make sure the Trump agenda didn't become a reality. And in 2016, I was heartbroken. I was in tears. I still get emotional about it because I know what's at stake. And I know what it's like for DACA recipients. I know what it's like for single mothers. I know what it's like for so many people who have suffered over the past 4 years. But we know right now that all is on the line right now. We know that people will be wanting to, the conservatives want to make sure that we have to make a choice between our health and our right to vote. But we need to make sure everyone on this call, from what we learned from the organizers, what we learned from our AFT Wisconsin president, Kim Kohlhaas, what we learned from Jon Lovett and everyone at Crooked Media, that we need to make sure that we get everyone on the same page to come volunteer. And that is you all. And you guys have been here for weeks right now adopting Wisconsin. So I'm just going to say, as a Milwaukeean, I need you. I need you to get involved. And throughout the evening, our organizers have been dropping in the chat box with ways you can get involved. In particular, text banking this Saturday. I need you to help my community make sure we do not have long lines and have to put our health at risk in November. I need you guys to get involved this Saturday, June 20th at 11 a.m. Central Time to text my fellow neighbors to help us text them to get them to request their absentee ballots. We cannot do this without you. And together, as a community, as a country, we're going to defeat the Trump agenda, and we are going to make sure we usher in an era of progress for our communities. We are in a moment, and it's time for us to grasp it and take it. So we hope you join us next week for our next training event where we'll synthesize everything we learned about and connecting you with tons of different volunteer opportunities. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night. And always remember, we are the change that we seek, and together we will defeat Trump's agenda. Thank you all. You have a good night. Oh, follow me at Liberal Stallion, by the way. Shameless plug.